Hello and welcome to From the Margin Lands. I'm Arti Kumar Rao.
Hi, I'm Prem Panikar, and for once, Aarti and I are in different cities. Not for once, from here on. Aarti is in Bangalore. I've now shifted to Kochi, which
How
feels
is
weird, sort
Kochi?
of. Well, if you're looking at the
How's the
weather, it's
traffic
hot.
in Kochi?
Oh, you know what? It keeps moving. I mean, at least all the places that we've been so far, and this is my, fourth trip to Kochi, this time permanent, but three other trips, as you remember. Uh, the traffic flows. There are bottlenecks, uh, but oh God, there are no potholes, which for
What?
me, yeah,
Okay, I can't even conceive of no potholes.
I've, I mean, still haven't got my car, but taken both cars and autos, and it doesn't strike you initially, but suddenly you realize, you know what, it's not bumping, what's going on? And then you
Wow.
start looking and you realize that there are no potholes. It's clean. There are no mountains of garbage lying all over the place. Uh, so there's all of that. It's hot.
Ah, is
Uh,
it? It's
so
November,
yeah,
end of
yeah.
November.
End of November. It is a month where there is no expectation of rain, but it's been raining every evening for the last 4 5 days,
Hmm.
and really raining. It's not a drizzle or whatever.
Hmm.
It's going to take some getting used to. Also, I realized that all the numbers that I had saved, the plumber, the carpenter, the electrician, the all of that is now the laundry guy.
Few
All of
hundred
that is
kilometers away.
yeah. And now I have to find it and build that network all over again. But anyway, that's how it is.
Hmm.
Hopefully, by the time we record the next one, I should be in better shape.
You should be able
But
to have your laundry guy at least. You
yeah,
should have done laundry.
seriously.
कपड़े उतार के
So
रखो. Inside joke. Never mind.
yes, that is going to get me into trouble with,
I know,
but
I know, I know. No, no, no. I'm not saying anything else. Just an inside joke.
yeah, it doesn't matter. Anyway,
All
so
right. Hmm.
to get to what this whole thing is about. So, in this particular episode of From the Margin Lands, we're looking to step into a landscape that most of us think we know but rarely see very clearly, the world of the Indian leopard. We usually encounter the leopard through these grim headlines of encounters with humans, very grainy CCTV clips accompanying them. We glimpse the leopard as maybe a shadow on a compound wall, a silhouette in a sugarcane field. Um, and behind all of this, though, lies one of the most remarkable ecological stories of our time, that of a large carnivore that has learned to live and often thrive in the middle of India's most densely used human landscapes. So, to help us peel back those layers, Aarti, we've got today's guest. You want to talk about her?
I'm going to fangirl big time because I just absolutely adore her work. I've been following it now for since 2011.
Hmm.
Which of course is, I mean, she's been working in the field a long, long, long before that. But we're joined today by the excellent Dr. Vidya Atreya, one of India's most respected carnivore ecologists and someone whose work has fundamentally changed how the country understands human leopard relationships and the leopard in general, of how it is, how it operates. And she's worked in Maharashtra and all over India, actually, challenging long held management practices, helping people, working with the forest department closely to make sure that policy is framed in a way that is fair, and reminds us that coexistence is not a romantic ideal. It is already happening in shared landscapes. So, coexistence being more shared than anything else. And we'll let her talk about that. So, yes, this is a story about science, but it's also about culture, about memory, about stories, about lore, and how we how we choose to live with one of the most fascinating big cats in the world, the Indian leopard. So, welcome, Dr. Vidya Atreya. Hi, Vidya. Welcome to From the Margin Lands. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Sure, Aarti. Thanks for having me over. And nice to see you too, Prem.
Pleasure, Vidya.
So I'm going to be fangirling like hugely, Vidya, because you have been such a inspiration, especially your work and also your cycling everywhere. By the way, she cycles with Raj Shekhar.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So there's that connection too. And they cycle like long distances, amazing characters they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you
Yes.
still
So,
doing that?
no, I had some leg injury a couple of years back, so I haven't, but
So
I'm
that was
hoping
my
to get.
introduction. I mean, of course, your work was introduction too, but then the off work introduction was when Rajshekhar said, "Oh yeah, Vidyana, you must come and all." And then I realized that I'm not in the same league at all.
You start preparing. So we only cycle on flat roads, is the plan. We don't go up and down. And because all these cycles have gears nowadays, it's like we start training on the ride. Like the first day is slow, then the second day. So you can totally do it.
Oh well, maybe one day when your leg gets all right and we can all go. Maybe on just a short one, maybe around
Sure,
Goa or
sure,
across
sure.
Goa and into the Western Ghats. One can dream.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. Prem, you want to kick us off? Get started with this episode.
Yeah, sure. So, Vidya, when you think back to your early years in the field, what was it that first drew you to leopards specifically?
Oh, so the thing is, I've always loved cats because of my mom, who again always loved cats and kind of like I'm a Konkani and
Hmm.
we eat fish and my father-in-law used to kind of say that cats understand Konkani, so that's where it kind of came from. So I've always had cats at home, and I think it's really helped because you understand the animal. And I wish, like, other species, biologists working on other species had these domesticated, because it really helps you, like, you see them growing up and you grow up with them. And, nowadays when I see all these kids with cats that they've never had before and they totally don't understand the body language of the animal. So I'm really grateful to my mom for being such a cat fan. So I've always wanted to work on cats, and the leopard was so. I did like I was part of the when I joined WI, I was part of the Asiatic Lion Survey with Dr. Ravi Chellam, and then I did a clouded leopard survey in Northeast India.
Hmm.
And then I just went on a, like, I left, I went abroad, and then I had my daughter. And then when we came back to this rural town of Narayangaon, which is 75 kilometers from Pune, which had a huge leopard problem there. Like there were, 50 people attacked in 2 years, I think, exactly where we were living, you
When
know.
was
Hmm.
this?
This was 2003. Yeah, so it was really fascinating, and that's where the work started because I didn't want to work when my daughter, till she went to the first standard. Friends got together and they said, you kind of manage it and we'll do the field work and stuff. And that's when it got really fascinating because when I started working, I didn't think the leopard should be in croplands. And, over the years, nearly, I think 15 years, the leopards taught me so much. And so it was kind of serendipitous. I always say that it was leopards. It was just in my backyard, and I had people who wanted to work on it. I had an amazing forest department. In fact, I had a really good time working with the forest department people that I met along the way in that region. So Pune, so Maharashtra, I pretty much worked in Maharashtra all my life. So all in all, it was like a great experience. Yeah.
So the 15 years that the leopards have taught you something, we'll go through all of that, yeah? Slowly, deeply.
Yeah.
But that's fantastic. So, sorry, I'm jumping in here, Prem. I'm going to ask her one question on what she just said, where she said that she did not think leopards belonged in croplands. How do you think leopards came to be in croplands? Has that always been the case since we settled with agriculture, or is it a more recent development?
So, I mean, I think that's the beauty about wildlife in India, you know, nobody in their right mind will say there has to be so much wildlife in India that we see today. Like, we are so many people, we have so much livestock, and we have so much wildlife. So I think it's always been the case, but with leopards, because I always say that people, and this is a story, human leopard interactions is a story about the two most adaptable species, one human and one a leopard. So they're also very adaptable. And where I worked in Akole in Sangamner, it was a semi-arid landscape where wolves used to be present. It was rain-fed agriculture. But once they were allowed to use the river water for irrigation, which happened in the 80s, is what I was told, the whole, from semi arid, it's become lush croplands of sugarcane. I mean, can you imagine a drought prone area having 24/7 water now? Okay. And I think the wolves went, that's what the local people say, and the leopards came in. So it's just like us humans, wherever we can, we go and we live. And I think that's true with all adaptable species, the leopard being one of them.
But I mean, you made the point about leopards and being adaptable to various environments. What makes the leopard particularly such an extraordinary adapter when you compare it with the other big cats?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I don't know what makes it more adaptable, but I think its size really helps. Like uh, a tiger and a lion, the lion live in huge number in prides, but of course the lions also occur in croplands in Gujarat, which is
Hmm.
amazing. Half our lion population lives outside Gir. Okay.
Right.
And that is because of the people there who accept the presence of the lion. The tigers in many parts of India do live in croplands.
Hmm.
And in Bhopal, they live at the edge of the city. So I I think the leopard has an advantage because it's smaller, and when you see a leopard trying to hide itself, you just can't see it. So there's that remarkable capacity it has. And I don't know, I may be wrong, but sometimes, there's this word in Konkani, which is, I'm sure it's there in Kannada as well, and in Malayalam, which is buddhi.
Hmm.
So I think the leopard has the buddhi as well, allows it to kind of live in this really ever changing landscape and do well. Like, just to give you an idea, when I was going to camera trap in the cropland area, village area, I was like, oh my God, I'll have to kind of attract it, and, because where am I going to find them? Like, I didn't know, nobody had done it before. And then I realized that that landscape changes every day. One day there's a sari hanging in the same place, another day there's a tractor, the third day there are three cycles, another day there's a bullock cart. And the leopards don't care. They're walking up and down those same roads, so for it to have, whereas if you have leopards or large cats within a forest and you're trying to camera trap from them, even when they see a camera trap, they avoid it.
Correct.
Okay, so just to show how adaptable, and this also really, like Dr. Meva Singh's talk recently about how the urban monkeys have figured out how to open a Pepsi bottle,
Hmm.
which the peri-urban and the rural monkeys can't do. So there is something about, living close to people. And I think that even goes for human societies. If you get a tribal out of, some deep forest and get them to cross a road in Bombay, there's no way they're going to do it. So there's
Yeah.
something about urban spaces that kind of has to make us on our toes, literally. Yeah.
Do you have you worked, Vidya, with individual animals, tracking individual animals and therefore behavior? And are there differences in behavior between animals? So, like one more buddhi than the other, one more adaptable than the other, or species wide, is it the same?
No, that's a fascinating question, and I often wonder about it. So they say for elephants, like Dr. Tarsh, he says that elephants have different personalities. But in the case of leopards, it's so hard to see them. Like you have behavioral studies are possible only if you observe the animal, right? The moment they see you, they are off running. So it's very hard to do that. But I'm going to go back to the domestic cats, and
That's
they,
why I
and
asked.
you probably also know, each one, just like humans, has a
Yeah,
different temperament, but at the same time, there are also generalities, just like for humans as well. So we need to remember both, because you can't make a policy by saying every animal is different, or a law. Like, you have to make a policy using the generalities as a base. Yeah.
very true. And the reason I asked that question was because of my three domestic cats, which each one is so different. And
Yeah.
one of them that came to me at 2 days old has imprinted upon me, and it can open doors, and it's very perceptive. And we often think it's a human, it's not
Yeah. Yeah.
not
Yeah.
a cat.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's why I asked, because there could be like differences between Bombay leopards and your Narayangaon leopards, for example, right?
Yeah, 100%. But I think there's a lot of movement as well. Like we had one leopard who walked from close to Narayangaon in Junnad Taluka all the way to Bombay.
Mm,
And see, it's like, so I don't, I mean, maybe it's just my opinion, but I don't see much difference between humans and animals. We used to walk from South India to Himalayas like two
Mm.
generations back, and it wasn't a big thing. These animals weigh more than us. They're large bodied. So why be surprised when they walk large distances? And it's an integral part of their biology. Like if every human gets married within that same village, it's not going to last too long, the society, which is why there is intermingling. So similarly with them, they have to go out. The younger ones have to go out, and in their case, it's their societies are around females, like so mom, daughters live, you know, close by, and the males are the ones that go far away.
right. Stepping back, I'm just going to ask one basic question. Has there ever been a leopard census across India?
There has been, but I think it's a really initially, it was a figure taken out of a hat, but long back, like 20 years back, it was 14,000. But I think now with the tiger census, they've also done it. It's a similar figure. But it's very hard to count leopards in human dominated landscapes because,
Exactly, yeah.
yeah, it's much easier in a protected area.
Mm,
And I think sometimes, like, also, like, people are like, how many leopards there are? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there are 10 leopards or 100 leopards in a human dominated landscape, because even if it's 10, it can potentially cause damage. Like tigers, which were counted because their numbers were decreasing, it was done for a specific reason to know whether they're increasing, what's happening, because they had really gone very low. But in the case of leopards, to me, rather than sitting and counting the animals, you probably need to proactively take measures to reduce losses to humans. I mean, it's a different approach for a different problem, not
mm.
Mm.
putting all problems as numbers.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Prem?
Yeah, yeah. I was wondering because we were talking about census and numbers and data generally. Uh, what has telemetry, say caller data, taught us about how leopards use these, the fragmented landscapes that they inhabit?
Yeah, so we had these GPS, GSM collars. So they
Hmm.
had SIM cards in them, and every 3 hours they would give us the time and the location of the animal.
Right.
And it taught us some very fascinating things because these animals were living among humans,
Hmm.
settlements. So the first thing they taught us is that they barely move in the daytime. They're just sitting. And in the night time, when human activity is low, is the time that the leopards are out and about. And even when they're out and about, they're not moving much. They're moving like 700 meters to a kilometer because human landscapes, rural landscapes, are so rich in prey, which is
Hmm.
domestic prey. So where I worked, there was no wild herbivore prey. So they were largely eating dogs and goats and sheep. Also in rural landscapes, a lot of the domestic animals die just due to diseases and stuff. So farmers usually just discard the carcasses. So that food is there. Then there are house cats. They were eating a lot of house cats as well. Yeah,
I
so
think Divya lost a cat, right? And she, well,
yeah,
years ago,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
why? But yeah.
But having said that, in Goa, pythons eat cats. Yeah, I mean, like they just finish, they hang out on the paths the cats use and just gobble up. Like I lost two of
Seriously,
them, my neighbor lost four.
cats
Yeah,
are supposed to have such good reaction times, though. A
but this
slow
guy
moving
probably
python.
just sits there, like not on their path, just, so they don't see the movement till it's got it.
Ooh.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, yeah, but having said that, yeah, so there's a lot of food for them to eat. And also, very interestingly, what we found is that in the nighttime, when they go very close to people's houses,
Mhm.
okay, because the goats and the dogs are there. But in that landscape, when I worked for 3 years, there was not a single death of a human due to leopards. So they are going very close to people's houses in the night. They are more active in the night when people are not very active. And their home ranges were pretty small, like 8 square kilometers, because I think the density of dogs, pigs, goats, sheep is so high that they
Mhm.
don't need big home ranges. And we got some pretty interesting information of animals going back to the site of capture, and
Okay.
also of large scale movements. Like one of our animals that we called Azoba, he traveled 125 kilometers in 25 days. So we got all these snippets of
So
information.
I went and got a subscription to Z5 only for Azoba.
Did you see it?
Not yet. I've started it. Started it, not finished it yet.
I
She's
think
still
it
on the
would have
tree.
been better. She's still
Huh?
in the tree.
She's in the tree. So, Prem, this was Urmila Matondkar who was styled on Vidya Atreya.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. With all the tank tops and the knee high boots. And
Okay.
fascinating. And it's about this amazing cat which walked and then it was found in a well, was it?
yeah,
At
yeah,
some
yeah,
point?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
With a dog or whatever. It
yeah,
starts
yeah.
like that. That's how the movie starts. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah.
So actually, it's very interesting because the movie in the movie the main protagonist is actually Azoba.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool.
So it was
Yeah.
an old animal, is it? Is that why it was called Azoba?
Yeah, because from his dentition, he looked like he was a bit older, and I think it was the summer, and he was tired, and he was just so gentle and large and old that we just called him Azoba, which means grandfather in Marathi. Yeah.
Hmm.
So to go back to your question about and Prem's question about the caller data. So do these guys travel these large distances primarily in the dark?
Yeah, I think human dominated landscapes they use only in the night. They don't use in the daytime. It's dangerous for them as well to use in the daytime, right?
Hmm.
I mean, the
Right.
worst, I think we kind of need, I mean, at least I believe that we need to flip this equation we have between large wildlife and people. They are really, really scared of us, right? And we never acknowledge that because we are so scared of them.
Hmm.
Okay. But if you look at it, for a leopard in that landscape where there is no tiger, the other creature that can kill it and kill it without reason at the end of the day are humans.
Right.
And it has always been that. I think ever since we were primates, tiny primates whom the large cats could have taken, ever since we've been, Homo sapiens, we have been predators of those. And it's generations of fear towards
Hmm.
humans that is there, which we
Hmm.
never kind of think about.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to pick up on something. I mean, you were talking about leopards and how they interact with domesticated animals. I was thinking of the feral dog populations. How do they shape leopard distributions, conflict patterns, etc.?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I think you know you've interviewed Abhi, right? Dr. Abhi Manak. So he is very much against the feral dogs, and I can understand why, because they are a threat to a lot of wildlife, you know. But I remember this funny conversation I had with him saying, I don't agree with you because the feral dogs are subsidizing a lot of the leopard populations in India.
How's
You
that?
know, yeah, because that's the main diet
So they
in
eat.
many places.
Hmm.
Yeah, so but I don't know. I think India is like to me a separate case. Like even if it's not feral dogs, let's say you remove all the garbage in rural India and you remove, you know, there's no feral dogs. But even if you just take the density of own dogs, because we have such a high density of human beings, there's always going to be a high density even of owned dogs in the rural landscapes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Mm. And do they compete for? I know that you said that they are prey, but do they also compete for prey? Like, do you have feral dogs? If these guys have made a kill, do feral dogs contest them for kills?
Uh, I don't think they will unless it's a pack.
Mm.
And in rural landscapes, I've not seen many packs because each of it is kind of, except if it's near the market area or something. Uh, I don't know, but I have heard of an interaction. I don't know really. That's a question answer I don't have. But I know that hyenas. I've heard farmers say that they've seen hyenas trying to take away the kill of the leopard because in my landscape hyenas are there too at the same density as leopards
Same
and
density as leopards, did you say?
same density as leopards.
We
Wow.
hardly see them or hear of them.
Yes, because they also eat goats, but if you put up a trap, no hyena will walk into a trap. It's only the silly cats which will walk into a box.
Like our whole house cats who can't resist
Oh
boxes.
my god, like an Amazon box, like half their size, and they are in it, you know. So, I mean, hyenas also take goats and stuff, but you never hear of them because just I know. And also the farmers tell me, I mean, I think this whole, it's like Gir as well, which fascinates me because the lions occur as prides and they are eating livestock as well. But of course, they eat these cows which are abandoned, you know, these old cows. But they put up trap cages to catch leopards. And there was this news article where the trap cage that they had put up to catch a leopard in Gir, a young lion went into it. And that young lion was known by those villagers. He had a name.
Hmm.
They got the forest department to release the lion there and there because they had a relationship with that individual. You know, but
Right.
leopard, no. So what's the difference between this fellow and that? It's just the color of the spots, I mean, the color of the skin. So a lot of these issues are in the minds of people, you know.
Hmm. So
Interesting. Go on, Prem.
no, I just wanted to shift the conversation a little bit to the human leopard interface. Uh, what do we actually know about why attacks happen? Are there identifiable triggers or contexts for that matter?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So our initial study, which looked into large number of attacks in this human-dominated landscape, found out that there was a correlation between the release of a lot of leopards into one site, and
Hmm.
all the attacks happened downstream of that. So you catch an animal which is a resident, which has never done anything to people. Okay, but it's eaten livestock and all, which it does. And then you pick up such an animal and leave it in a place which you think is a good place because there are not many humans, it's near a forest, and that animal is stressed, disoriented. You've taken it out of its social system, you've taken it out of its territory where it knows how to avoid people, and you've put a hungry, agitated, stressed animal in a new place. So there are a
Hmm.
lot of instances we were initially putting microchips in the leopards because we didn't have money for telemetry. This was like long back, 20 years back. Lots of examples of microchipped animals that had gone on to attack people near the site of release were still where they at places where there was never a history of attacks on people by leopards, by the resident leopards. So you're actually creating a worse problem by doing that. That is one, okay, which we could find a correlation for. But having said that, I mean, a lot of the old hunters would say it's a physically damaged animal and it's an old animal. But I have seen enough of leopards that don't have canines, that are very old, but living among really large density of people, yet not attacking. And I have seen one of the translocated leopardesses, I'll never forget. She was in amazing condition. There was nothing wrong with her. And even one tigress, I remember in Gondia, but they went on to kill people in a very predatory manner. The tigress in Gondia in the daytime was hearing human voices, going towards the groups of people, killing people, and then guarding the body, which is all very strange because one is they're not active in the daytime. Two, if they hear human voices, they run away, and then they don't guard bodies. Like I've seen, when I was interviewing some 600 farmers for the livestock losses, not one of them said that in the night when they hear the leopard coming to take the goat or etc., they run out, right, to prevent it. Not once has a leopard guarded the goat or anything. They run away. So then what makes such an animal, which is so scared of humans, sit over a dead body while there's a mob of people in front of it? I haven't understood it, but I think it is more in the mind of the animal rather than the physical domain. Like something's happened in its mind that makes it overcome the fear it has towards humans and goes with an attempt to kill the human.
So, Vidya, I mean, the subtext of what you're saying is that when leopards are translocated is pretty much when there is uh, a trigger for such conflicts, right? So, what would be better alternatives that align with science and with community safety?
So, we had this amazing project we did in Bombay, which was called
Mhm.
Living with the Leopards. And, that's what we found. That's the only thing that works is changing the mindset of the people to
Mhm.
have cleaner surroundings so that you're not attracting dogs and you're not attracting bandicoots and therefore not attracting leopards. Two is you don't have a choice because India has so much of domestic animals. Fine, like people want the dogs removed, remove the dogs. Then there are the pigs, and then there's the dairy farm which throws its dead buffaloes, and then there are rats and there are cats, and it doesn't take much to keep a leopard. One leopard needs one dog per week. You know, uh, so we had to change the mindset of the people around Sanjay Gandhi National Park, which saw 30 attacks on people per year in 2004 and 2005. And the reason why that was happening was every time somebody saw it from the building, they would call saying trap it, and it would be trapped and released, and that created the problem. At the same time, the Wadli tribals who live inside Sanjay Gandhi National Park with houses made of sticks are totally okay to see the leopard walking by their main door open, and they even
Right.
revere it. They worship the animal and they know about it. So kind of, and then getting the police involved. So it was a holistic, community based work that we worked a lot with the media to tell them, that this is a problem. If you're going to keep amplifying a problem where none exists, like calling every leopard a man eater, heightening the fear, is going to make people scared. It's been now how many years? It's been 10 years and so few attacks. Like I think only 2017 had a few attacks, but between like 13 to now, barely any attacks. So that's my question. Like, so many leopards, highest density of leopards ever,
Mm.
highest density of people ever, no attacks. Then why are places with way lower number of people, lower number of leopards having attacks? Because there is nothing that is being done proactively to engage with all the stakeholders to change this mindset of just seeing it as a problem. And come elections and everything is blown out of proportion, and elections go, nobody remembers to do anything, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you brought up the point that even within Sanjay Gandhi National Park, there are tribes that actually revere, worship leopards. Another classic example being Wagoba, for instance. Uh, what do we, or what can we learn from these cultural relationships, and are they evolving or are they weakening?
The second question is a complex one. Are they evolving or are they weakening? But let me go back to the first one. So, what we are finding is, uh, so a lot of people now have started looking into the nature culture relationships.
Mhm.
And what like I am finding is that with all these animals which are large, which are charismatic, you know, there is definitely a feeling of fear, but there's also a feeling of awe, they say. There's also a feeling of reverence. And that when they pray to this Wagoba, for instance, they're not praying to it only so that livestock attacks don't happen. They're also praying to it so that natural disasters don't happen. And one of my, yeah, that's pretty cool, right?
Wow.
And yeah, and once when I was on that cycling trip with Rajshekhar, we turned around this very steep corner in southern Maharashtra, and there was this huge temple, Vagoba Shrine. Okay, like a proper temple with a rock inside and a huge tiger face in the temple. And outside that shrine, like the inner shrine, there were these wooden hands and feet that were carved and kept. So I looked at it and I'm like, oh my God, maybe this is the people it's attacked. And then like I asked a passerby, and he like, oh no, if they have hand ache or leg ache, they make this and keep it in the belief that the pain will be cured. So what I'm trying to say is like mine was, as I say, the typical biologist gaze where I only see conflict because most of us are atheists. Most of us have no clue about how rural India lives or the rituals that surround it or nothing. Like this Kantara thing that came out, like my
Mhm.
aunt, it goes on in our village every year. And I didn't know it till this movie came out. So uh, so that's the thing. Like I was just telling Aarti that we recently did a report on the wild dogs in Valparai, and I saw the picture of the sweetest little shrine of a wild dog in the forest, and they call it with respect as an elder. And many of these stories with tigers I've heard, and with wolves in Karnataka, that movie by Kripakar Senani called Walking with Wolves, amazing because it talks about brotherhood between tigers and people or wolves and people, and how usually the human cheats the other brother and therefore is okay when the other brother comes and takes a couple of livestock. So and it's like when I went near Tadoba and I was talking to some people, like even wild herbivores, deer coming and eating their crops. They are like traditionally we've kept a part of our land for these animals. So it's okay because we have taken their land.
Hmm.
So this kind of deepness in the way rural people live with the life around them, I think yeah, it's quite incredible.
It's interesting you said that bit about the shrine where you place body parts when you have aches and pains and you want relief, because that actually happens in temples in Kerala. I don't know of other parts of the country, but in temples in Kerala, a lot of them you find a tray full of assorted body parts, and you just pick whatever is bothering you and place it
Amazing.
before. Yeah,
Okay.
It's
Okay.
the exact same thing. I
Wooden
think
body parts, right?
it's actually beaten metal. I
Whatever it
mean,
is, it's not
Amazing.
real
no,
body parts.
no,
How big is it?
very tiny. I mean, it would be. We call it an Alrubum, which is Alrubum means the image of a human. The full, that is assuming you're like me and I've got aches and pains all over my body, then you take the whole thing.
I
If you've
see.
got, yeah, if it's just your hand or something, there's this tiny little
I see.
hand
I
and you
see. I
place it.
see.
Yeah.
Amazing. No, these were quite large and almost like real.
Huh. No,
So
these
they
Yeah.
are,
must have been molds or something, no?
They were wood. They were carved of wood. Yeah.
Wood. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Aarti,
Amazing.
I've been monopolizing with your time, so
No,
your
no.
turn.
So actually, I wanted to shift. This is a very nice segue, actually, because some of these cultural aspects of not just the leopard but wildlife in general, I would love to hear. Since Vidya has worked all over India, I'd love to hear some more lore, as well as if you could just talk a little bit about how these animals are referred to by the local people. Like, for example, I heard that the leopard in Himachal and in the Pahadi areas is called Guldar, which is just such a beautiful name for, in my head, for a rosetted creature like this. So, like that, do you know of any other ways that they are mentioned that talk or speak to uh, s- the relationship that the communities have with these creatures?
What I will say is a bit more uh, zoomed out
Yeah.
because when I was working, a lot of the foreign filmmakers like 10 years back would come and say, "We want to make a story on the man eaters." And I was like, that's not the story, guys. And, so it was a fight for me. I even wrote a letter of complaint, I think, to one of those big TV channel editors saying, what, like, this is because in Himachal, for instance, one of our colleagues work over there. These are just rural communities. They're not tribals, etc. But they've always shared space with leopards, right? So they just call it mrig,
Hmm.
which is wild animal.
Hmm.
Oh.
Okay, and then you have this, all these foreign channels coming in saying predator and showing the fangs and the music and you're taking something as beautiful as a neutral beautiful word that just says wild animal, and you are sensationalizing it by just the flip of a term by calling it a predator when that term doesn't exist for us. And now because TV is all over, and I remember so vividly them showing this animated 3D version of a mountain lion going for the neck of a human being, like it's just like, what are you doing, guys? I mean, you're just doing Jaws all over again for us in India when we don't need it, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Vidya, that's perfect because I wanted to ask a lot of, I mean, I've been listening to you for the last 30, 35 minutes, and I'm seeing the leopard and wildlife in general in a way that is different from what I used to. Uh, and my previous sense of it, I realize, comes a lot from how the media frames uh, wildlife in general and public safety alongside it and all that. Uh, I'm curious, what would responsible reporting look like?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I'm just again, I'll come to that question answer. So please don't make me forget it. But I also want to say some other thing. Like, you know, to me, India is the only country in the world where we have these relationships. They're being forgotten because they're orally passed down. There's
Hmm.
no documentation of it whatsoever, very little. And it's the only place on the planet where people and wildlife share spaces to the extent they do. It's not just wildlife, it's all living forms in a way. Dogs on the street, or, you know, cows on the street, or whatever. Like for us, it's a pain and it's like we take it for granted. But does it also show another way of living? Is my question. Like just yesterday, I read this article about the cats in Turkey. I'm sure there's zillions of tourists going to just see that. Okay, and we are just demonizing the dogs on our street. When did you know that what is the statistic? I think each day 500 people die on road accidents in India. Nobody's creating a hullabaloo about that.
Cars, yeah.
Okay, yeah, and people and nobody's addressing that. Some 10 people die every day minimum. I think it's more in Bombay, the rail accidents. But we are demonizing animals with which people have relationship, with people have always shared spaces, and it's always around election time. You know, I think that's so sad because what you're doing is taking a long shared cultural history of shared spaces and putting it in one bin, and you're going to lose out something that no other country has anymore. So to me, that's a very sad thing. And there, the media plays a huge role. So coming back to the media, what changed the deal, if you ask me, in Bombay were two things. One was a very proactive forest officer who took leadership, which we need. Yeah, an NGO or anybody else can't go in and make a difference at scale. Yeah. So that, and then he catalyzed all this, and then part of the people we were talking to were like police, media, and the media, Bombay Press Club, the Mumbai Patrakar Sangh. And we had a lot of workshops, and all of us didn't want to be talking to the media because administration doesn't like them, biologists don't like them. But it was such a positive engagement, and we even did a sweet little study looking at the headlines on the media reporting before and after the workshops. And we found that despite there was no conflict, reporting was higher. It was more neutral reporting. It was more about what to do. Okay, so they make a huge difference. But it can't be a one-off session either. You can't just go once and give. It is a at for that site, it has to be a continuous engagement. And they also say we are dying for good news. Like, I mean, high quality news. Even if it's about conflict. Why? What? If we don't get it, we are going to sensationalize. We are going to sensate. And now it's even worse. Like then when we were working, social media hadn't taken off to the extent it has now. And I've been seeing some amazing AI generated videos now.
Yep.
I saw one today. Two dogs
Okay.
and a leopard. Did you see that?
No.
One got its tail and one got its head. And I was like, please. I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah. Having said that, I saw a really cute one as well, where a little kid wearing a, kaka topi hat and a gold. No, the leopard is wearing a gold chain. Both of them are sitting in the newsroom and they're discussing the leopard issue, and it was really cute. Yeah, but it was all AI generated. So I still think working with print media can help because I don't know, it helped for us in Mumbai a lot. And I think older people, especially in the policy domain, etc., will be reading, like, even if it's they're reading it on a device, they are reading print media, you know?
Mm.
Yeah.
Aarti?
So I want to pull Vidya back to the point where you talked about Rig being wild animal and something so neutral, something so benign. Actually, it's not seen as a threat. It's not seen as something that attacks, etc. I wanted to ask you, among whom does that kind of sensibility reside? Is it the older people in the community? Do the young people know how to parse some of these relationships? And also, with that, how does out migration from villages then affect the lens with which the people view, like people who might have migrated for a good education, come back and they are now shorn from the landscape? They have no real relationship with the land. Then how do they see the potential relationship or the shared spaces with an animal like the leopard?
So I don't think we've really studied this to say, but what I can say is from a short study that was done by my colleague in Dahanu near Bombay, where she mapped like 100 and I think 30 Vagoba shrines. Each village had a shrine, and all it's like Ganpati in Maharashtra. Like you all go back to your native village during Ganesha.
Correct.
So for Vagbaras, so they have Vagbaras, which is a festivity around Vagoba. All the young people come back to their village, and like I think interviewing them, she found that a lot of knowledge is passed on from the older to the younger people. I don't know how much of that will be there anymore with digital. This was before social media came on in such a big. But at the same time, I think I also see, the thing is, younger people are always going to be less wise and less wise, right? I think among three of us, we have hopefully, not everybody, but hopefully some of us become wiser as we grow older, right? Younger, we are like hot-headed and
True.
yeah.
True.
So I don't think it's. I mean, I see a lot of people saying this, oh, the young ones are different. Yeah, but sure, we were also different when we were young, but we've changed over time. The rootedness of your place comes back to you as you become older. Other values come into place when you're older. So I don't know how much of that is just being young.
Mm.
That young person going back as an older person. And I see a lot of that where the younger people who left and do go back with a sense of pride and trying to do things for that place. And I'm just hoping that that is more and more the case. I mean, India has so much to offer. Like, for instance, I was talking to some friends who have friends in Coorg, and she was saying that a lot of the younger people who went out for their education and all have come back now, and they are so proud of what they want. They want to make a difference. They want to, and Coorg is an amazing place.
Hmm.
And so is most of India,
Yeah.
which is in the rural space. Yeah. So I really don't know. I think it's way more complex than that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, because I was just thinking of something that even Nachiket said, where he talked about how um, the youngsters are no longer, they don't know how to fish anymore, or they're not
Right.
fishermen anymore, right? And they go out and then they come back and they kind of feel disconnected in a sense from their land. And so it was so that's why I was just a little curious, because then how does the tolerance of having a creature like a leopard in the
Correct.
thing, whether that changes, and whether they know then how to negotiate with the creature, and allow both sides allow how that would change. But yeah, I hear you. I hear you that
Yeah.
it could be a frame.
Yeah, I mean, you just brought up what Nachiket was talking about. I was thinking of what Kalyan was talking about. Kalyan Verma was our guest in the previous episode. Uh, I mean, when the four of us worked together on Peeply, one of the things that I remember Kalyan reporting on when he did that series on elephant human conflict in Hassan was that much of their anger of the locals in the Hassan region was not directed actually at the elephants so much as at the forest department. The argument being that the forest department's reactions were not what it should be. Uh, I was wondering in that same context, when there are these leopard human context, how do the forest departments respond? What works? What doesn't work?
No, that's a really apt question. I always say I had the good fortune working in Maharashtra because I think it's on average, I would say it's one of the good departments I've worked with. But I also remember going to one of the hill states long back after a boy was killed. And, there was this drunk RFO at 9:30 in the morning, just misbehaving, especially the film crew woman. And and I was just thinking, in a case where a person has been killed, you can't have people like this going and representing the institution, and no thought is given to that. Who is going and talking? Is there a way of going and talking? And I really saw this, and at my study site, a boy was taken at the very young kid, 1 year or so, maybe. He was in the front of his house with his grandfather, and his grandfather just went in to get a glass of water, came back, and the kid was gone. So next morning, the ACF, he called me and he said, we haven't been able to find the body. Are you nearby? Can you help? So we also went, and we found the body, you know, but the head was never found. It had taken it like a kilometer away. And but that officer had driven at 3 in the morning, the moment he came to know. He had driven from Pune, like this 4 hour journey to this place. And he was with the villagers the entire time. And the respect that they had for him when the body was found and his vehicle took it to the, you know, for, wherever they had to take it. It was so evident that it is empathy at the end of it. If you can't have basic empathy, obviously you're going to have conflict.
Right.
And I'll tell you, that also really struck me when one of the hill states about 7 years back came for a exposure visit to Bombay. It was a couple of their villagers, a couple of the local media, a couple of the forest chaps, and they came. And then at the end of their few-day visit, we had just this Baitak to discuss things and all. And these guys came up, the locals of that hill state came up. And what was really sad was they were so overwhelmed that the Sanjay Gandhi National Park director got off from his vehicle to greet them because they were guests. They're like, we've never seen this kind of uh, basic
Human
humanity.
decency. Yeah.
And that is in a conflict situation, you cannot be anything else. You're guaranteed severe conflict. Because as I would often say, that if the RFO doesn't deal well with the situation, let's say it's a drunk person who doesn't come to office too much, they can't kill the officer. They will definitely kill the animal. They will definitely be really angry at what's happened to them, especially if it's a poor farmer who's lost something that he relies on for subsistence. So it's a way more, and I don't even know if our administration is trained to. I mean, I don't know, it's a really complex thing because the forest department is a very tiny department that is in charge of like almost everything, like if you ask me, okay. And conflict needs a separately trained force that is licensing. The roads are cutting through habitats, the railways are cutting through habitats. Animal husbandry department is giving animals, please take more domestic animals. Agriculture department is saying, please grow more crops. And in all this, the wild animals, you can't have like 4.5 forest staff handling all these multitude of issues, yeah, when they have so much on their plate as it is. So ideally, we should have a separate force with some community. I would recommend community representation with women and men who are actually trained to deal with this in a humanitarian way, because this is not a crisis of economy, if you ask me. I mean, has economic implications, but it's more like it's more about people here, right? And also, I must tell you, I'm sorry, but I do not agree with the compensation system as it exists today. And I'll give you one example, which made me realize why. Because a calf of one of our families, we used to go and visit where we put our camera traps. The calf was killed by a leopard. So we were walking around her house, like, 6 months down the line, and she saw us and she like, oh, what happened to the compensation? And then the forest staff with me were like, oh, we gave it long back. And she like, I never got it. And now her husband is a drunkard. So that 6,000 rupees, like I say half in jest, you're subsidizing rural drinking problem with this compensation mechanism. Okay, that is one thing. And have you ever assessed its impact? Either
Hmm.
economic impact or impact to on whether people are really happy with it? No, you're assessing Narega, you're assessing so many other schemes. Why aren't you assessing this scheme where crores and crores of rupees are spent each year?
Hmm.
Hmm.
This was actually going to be my question.
Yeah, I was also
Compensation.
interested
Yeah.
in that question. Let's go for it. Go for it, Prem.
No, yeah, that was it. I mean, are we compensating the right things? Are we compensating for the right things? So, how would a more humane compensatory policy look like?
Wait. Okay, I'm going to go one step back.
Hmm.
Vidya, take us through what might happen in a rural setting from the taking of a livestock till that particular investigation or whatever finishing and compensation being given. What's it like, and of course how is it different across in the country?
So I don't know for other parts of the country, but I'll tell you the complexity involved where I work. Okay, the guys who have lost livestock near the forest office, it's easier for them to file the claims.
Oh.
Yeah, so one is the proximity because all hands are at work on the farm. So you cannot just leave your field and then go far away for filing a compensation. So let's assume you're a farmer now who's far away. Okay, so then he usually will have to take his bike and go to this forest office where sometimes the officer may not be there. So he has to make 2, 3 visits. That's a problem. Half his day is gone at least. Okay. Then I think the moment it's been attacked, he needs to get a photographer and he needs to get a forest staff to come and verify his claim. Now, because these are remote rural areas, they will charge money for their time and travel. They are not going to come free, of course, because that's not their job. Maybe not the forest guard, but definitely sorry, not the photographer, the vet.
Ah,
Yeah, the wildlife veterinarian who also has
okay.
to give a photograph. So the wildlife vet will lose out on something else to count. So he has to pay money to do that. And then it takes worry. Yeah, and then it goes back to the department, and then they send it up and up and up, and then it takes a couple of months to come, and it's never the full amount because it's supposed to be ex gratia. It's not a full compensation, and no, the farmer is not told anything in this
Yeah, I
process.
was going to ask, how does
Yeah,
he know
he
what to
doesn't
do?
know, so he gets a fraction of the money he's expecting, and then he's even more annoyed.
Oh.
So there's no transparency, there is no information sharing. So I would keep saying that you need to make it like a IRCTC booking. Your file is here. This is the amount that has been sanctioned for you. And Maharashtra, then, it's been a while since I've worked, did an amazing thing of putting it directly into the beneficiary's bank account. Because before that, it was cash.
Hmm.
So, but still, people can ask for money after because they know that you've got money. So, yeah.
So one question: when say a leopard or a hyena, whatever, has come and taken a lamb or something, and it's taken it away, what will the vet photograph?
They can't.
Huh?
So they normally, I think, go and look at whatever's there. There will be evidence of some sort. But having said that, I know in Uttarakhand, when they really increase the livestock compensation, there's a lot of
Fake claims.
stray cattle, and they would find like 2 marks made by a screwdriver saying this is our. So and that's coming to Prem's point that in a country like India, you are going to have people trying to make money out of all these things. I feel a better option is to give it to the gram panchayat to manage. And
Hmm.
can each gram panchayat, I mean, come on, they're supposed to be managing their village. They can definitely manage a compensation system. And instead of giving them money, can we give them seed money to start a cattle bank, which they can figure out that the poorest person in the village manages it and keeps one they breed, especially leopards, it's goats, and they breed every year. So, the person who's managing it gets one as a payment every year. And then the village panchayat itself, using whatever local, I mean, they can come to a consensus. We don't need to
Yeah.
tell them what to do, right?
Yeah.
They can figure out their system. But we are like, here's a goat bank seed, one male and 3 females. How much is that going to cost? Not much. Now you figure it out and maybe train the youth to keep records, to use the computer, to, have an app that figures it out, and let them do it. Why do we need to do it?
So has this been mooted?
So there's one place in West Bengal which started it off for fishing cats. But I think politics, it was not the panchayat, but it was an NGO that started doing it, and it worked fine for the local thing, is what I've heard. But when it started to increase in size, then the politics came in. It's like, oh, you're affiliated with this party and you're being. So that's why I think NGOs should be out of it, government should be out of it. Yes, there's people will try to make money at the panchayat level, but they are anyway governing their villages. And whatever checks and balances or whatever money they'll make will be way smaller than anywhere along the system, right? And if it's an animal for animal, yeah, they may have like a party and eat 3 goats. I mean, I don't know, but can we figure out a way of checks and balances, get the youth involved maybe, and maybe, money that they get extra goes back into, fellowship for the students. Because see, that's another thing that I don't think a country like India should be using cash to incentivize, because we are not we don't work well with cash. There's always scope for corruption. But we work so well with social issues. Like, if it is something to do for a social, because that's what we learned with our Bombay project. It didn't have any money. And I'm glad it didn't have any money, because everybody came forward to do it just because they wanted to contribute to the park. So using something like that, where you're doing it for the good of your own villagers, using that as the driver rather than using cash as the driver, I think is a way more powerful way of doing it. It should be experimented, it should be tried.
Kind of answered that next question we were going to have, no?
About conflict
Read it.
mitigation policy, yes.
Oh, there are a lot of policies. Oh, there. I mean, sorry, I'm just going to go on a little rant here,
Please
because
do.
everybody's like, oh, we need to make policies. Even when I was younger, oh, policy is like the end all. It doesn't matter. Like, we don't follow laws here. A policy document is just a guideline. Nobody's going to be even reading it. And it's often mooted as, oh, there's a problem. Let's make a committee and let's have a policy. But I've seen some 6, 7 committees and formed and nothing. It's just, I mean, I don't know how to. I guess the way I would do things is to go into one place and try to make a difference just there. Because it's way impossible to do it through a policy or something where it's just in a document and it's not reaching down or not being practiced.
Yeah.
So guys, you have 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Aarti, the big questions that you wanted to ask.
I just wanted to bring it back to the leopard, Vidya,
Yeah.
and ask you. We had a question. What are the top 3 misconceptions people have about leopards?
One is that they are all scary and they want to kill us. I think it's the other way around. I think they're really scared of us and they're scared we will kill them. I also think, like cats, they're really, really smart. And you have to recognize, that's what I say. I believe there are 2 kind of attacks. One is an accidental attack. This is leopards because they're smaller in size compared to tigers. Tigers, if they just hit you, you might die, And the ones where they actually go for the throat with an intention to kill. And if the latter is the case, they have planned for it because they are sitting and watching every movement for a while before they make an attack. And the other thing that often, like, I don't know, maybe it's like too naive a thought or what, I don't know. If they're largely eating dogs and cattle, most of the animals have never killed a human in their life, right? In a place that if a human attack starts and it's a like 3-4 year old animal, it's lived 3-4 years without killing people. And then when it kills a human being, it knows that the neck is here, which means they have a much better awareness of the human body than we give them credit for, right?
Yeah.
It's like us
Wow.
knowing where the neck of each species is, right?
Right.
So that
Yeah.
is kind of cool for me. And I think they are really, really smart. I also think they recognize individual people. I have basis for this only, when we were working with the rescue center leopards, the way they will look at some people. I mean, if I am out of here, I'm going to kill that man.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And,
So you think so, really?
oh man, you can see it in their eyes. Like you'll see it in a cat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but these guys we see every day, so they know us and they know
No, but that
our
expression,
smells,
I
I guess.
will never forget that expression of that. And sometimes when they're looking at you, especially when I was, in the tranquilization process, the vet is at the back with the blowpipe, and I am trying to distract the leopard, and I can see that it's not aggression. Like at that moment, we are just looking into each other's eyes, and and I'm like talking, like I talk, saying like, chill, we are not going. And that animal seems to kind of know that it's not a. It's like you're talking to a dog or a cat. They know from your tone what you're trying to say, right? So I find all this really fascinating because I think they have way more agency than we even give them credit for.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I have
So
to tell you one. No, the 10 minutes
yes.
was just so that I'll go soon, but it's not 10 minutes.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
God. Because I was like, okay, now we have 8. So
Because you told me 1.5 hours.
yeah, 1.5 hours of chatting.
Okay.
Go on.
Uh, yeah, because our leopardess, we wanted to check if her collar was fine, and we were trying to recatch her to check. She just wouldn't come in the trap cage again. And not just that, she taught her 3-month-year-old cub to not get into the trap cage either.
Wow.
Yeah. So, because his pug marks were there all in the front, we had made the PIP. If he was scared, he would go in the trap cage. But it would be there, but he never went in. And she and her elder son would go and try and get the goat from the back, from the bait cage. And we camouflaged the cage and we made it look, we moved it and we made it look totally different. And we bought a new cage with a triangular design. She went on top and tried to get the bait, so really, really smart animals. I mean, that means they know where the front end of a trap cage is.
Yeah.
Avi, I'm going to take 2 minutes and ask you, and because I'm intensely curious, what is the private life of a leopard like? Like a female, a male, a baby? I mean, what does it look like?
Females have a pretty hard private life because they are always with kids. Once it's an adult, she is only having babies. And to have
Mm.
babies of, like, as the older one gets to about 2.5, she's already pregnant with the next litter. And to take care of, and her kids live with her for 1.5 to 2.5 years, and to live in a human dominated landscape taking care of your kids would be so stressful for her, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do these? I'm sorry. I'm just going to do these cycles now. Say she has a baby, but it's harvest time, so the fields are being harvested. Does she time her babies then when the grass is taller, or I mean,
No,
is there any
so
such thing?
I don't know because we really, but I know that they keep seeing cubs throughout the year, so we don't really know. But you have to recognize that, you know, the female's territory is 8 square kilometers, which is a
Mm.
large area.
Hmm.
And we saw with our female that when her den site was being harvested, She just moved her cubs to another field where,
Okay.
which, so the fields are not like the US where everything is one. It's
Uh-huh.
all like this,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you
yeah,
know. Yeah.
yeah.
And the males have fun.
Yeah, let me continue about her poor private life. And then occasionally her cub falls into a well, which happened with our collared females. And she roamed around and around the well till late in the night. And then in the morning, early in the morning, then she went and sat somewhere else. And then early in the morning, before human activity, she went round and round. And then the forest department took out the cub and rescued it and left it close to that well. And within like 20 minutes, they were together again. But I'm saying it's so stressful. It's about walking to the nearest, place where there are a lot of dogs and goats and pigs. It's about, yeah. And then imagine if you pick up such a mother and leave her 300 kilometers away. What a stressed animal you're leaving because she has kids back there,
Right.
right?
Gosh.
Or you
Yeah.
pick up a kid and you leave it somewhere and you're not see. And we've had so many cases where, you know, I've heard even in Karnataka, even in Maharashtra, that one leopard is trapped inside and on top there's another leopard on the trap cage walking around. Yeah. Give me a second. Yeah. Where was I?
The trap cage, and the other one's
Correct.
walking around.
So many, because imagine a young one, like a sub-adult is trapped in there. The mom is going to be crazy trying to get it out, right? Or the mom is trapped in there, you know, and the sub-adult son might be there trying to get her out. And all these, we never know what the story behind is.
What's the aggression level like of the male leopard towards like the sun or whatever? Is there that going on like it happens with?
No, so I think we have a very wrong, like I don't know. I feel because we've in our camera trap pictures, you get the mom, the father, the sub-adult son, and the cub all in the same camera trap. And even in Africa, where they actually can see these animals, they see that the father is hanging out with the sub-adult son, so I think they're way more social. Like even Bera Javai.
Mhm.
See, the problem with leopards is because they don't show themselves. I think it's a very misunderstood cat. In the few places they show themselves, like in Javai and in Yala, Sri Lanka, there are many of them together. In Yala, if I know right, there were two sisters walking together with two of their cubs each. So there were like 6 leopards. It's a family party, man.
Mhm.
And we don't think of them as animals that have societies, relationships, bondings. I mean, they're no different than us.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
Up to and including the fact that the mothers do all the work and the guys chill.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
So just before we let you go, then, what do you? I mean, no, no, Prem. Before I ask the last question, would you have anything to add? Questions?
No, go for it.
I was going to ask, so Vidya, what do you think is the future of the leopard in India?
I think the future of the leopard is the future of the elephant, the future of the domestic dog, the future of cattle on our street. It's just how Indians want to share their space with. And it's a common shared future. And to me, like 20 years back when I started work, I thought in 15 years there's going to be no wildlife in human use landscapes. It's like 20 years now, and I'm still amazed, that India has so. And I think we have a huge story to tell the rest of the world of how people and wildlife live together, about how all these relationships are. Bagoba is like at least 800 years old,
Hmm.
and I mean, that's the thing. We know about Project Tiger, which started in 1973. We don't know about the institution of Vagoba, which is many centuries old. I mean, how shameful should we be, right? Nobody is documenting it. I mean, we are okay forgetting these shared histories, which to me is the bigger problem. So I don't know. I think India is at a crossroad. Like, can we celebrate this way of living that is nowhere else on the planet now? Or are we going to go the rest of the way the planet has gone and make them them and us, and not it being a shared, journey, which it should be, because I think at the end of the day, we are the ones who have the power to shape how we want our landscapes to look like, right? You can't ask the elephants or the leopards to do that. It's only the humans who can, right? So, and I mean, I don't know, like this, it's just amazing the stories you hear, how people are okay with these animals, which is never out there. It is always the fearful, the worst kind of portrayal. And to me, that's a crime. It's not good.
Yeah.
Vidya, if our listeners remember only one thing from this conversation, what would it be? What should it be?
Mm. That I think we need to realize, not realize. I think that one thing that I would like listeners to take away is that we've been given the responsibility of managing other life forms around us. And that's a pretty serious responsibility. And I mean, if India does it, I think that'll be just so amazing. That's all. Yeah.
In a wild setting, right?
Wild, or even an other,
Hmm.
what is another? Could it be domestic? It could be other human beings. It could be anything. But I think our culture has allowed us to accept the other quite easily. In fact, so easily that we take it for granted. We don't even see the beauty in it, right? I mean, eunuchs. I'm going to take an example of the eunuchs. They were part of our society when I was little. For me, it was no, what's a big deal? And that's what we are taking for granted, even in the wild space or in the domestic animal issue space. That, yeah, I mean, it's all around. Yeah, but it's not there anywhere else,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Now, yeah, to get to appreciate uh, that very unusual chance that we have been given, the opportunity that we've
Yeah.
been given,
And
that
to
India
take pride in it as well.
And where can people go to read more or to get more information about the work you do and the kind of work that is being done in and around leopards?
I have a very old website called projectwagoba.com.
Okay,
So there's some stuff there. But there's a lot of new things happening. Like Banakatha has stories about coexistence. Then you have Coexistence Consortium, which has recently been started, which is quite amazing, you know. Yeah.
great.
Those.
Yeah.
So, Prem, you want to close this out? I've been talking now.
No. Uh, it typically happens with you that with the guests that we have, we start out with an idea of what we want to ask about, and then the guests give us cues to ask more questions. Plus, time runs out, and we find that we haven't even reached the halfway mark,
Right.
which has happened over here. All of which is a prelude to saying we're going to have you back uh, sooner than later. But thank you so much for taking the time, and particularly in the middle of all this distractions that you have going on right now.
No, no, that's totally fine, Prem. And thanks so much, because I think, yeah, it'll be really nice to chat again, because I think these in person, maybe, yeah,
Mhm.
these questions, uh, yeah, I think there's so much to talk about. Yeah.
And I have a wild idea, Vidya, and I'll moot it to you and Prem after this, and let's see if we can make it happen sometime soon.
Sure. Thanks so much, Aarti and
Okay,
Prem.
thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks. It's been absolutely fantastic speaking with you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Same here.
So that was Vidya Atreya on leopards. What did you make of it?
Well, I mean, apart from the very obvious point that Vidya, in common with the expert guests that we've had so far, they all speak such absolute common sense. And each time I listen to them talk about what is wrong or what can be done, and it's not just that they're complaining, right? They're also coming up with solutions. And each time I listen to them, and I'm like, there is so much sense around. And then we do nonsensical things. And that invariably baffles me, honestly. And the other thought that I had was, a bit of an irritation with the format that we use,
Mm.
in the sense that, you know how it is, right? I mean, we prepare for these things. We read their interviews, we watch their uh, recorded, taped interviews, whatever, read up about it. For this, we read research papers and things like that. And we have this whole list of questions. And I mean, both of us are reporters. We know that answers to questions then prompt more questions. There's a point where Vidya was saying, I can hear you typing. I was actually making a note of questions that occurred to me while she was talking, questions that were prompted by what she was saying. And yeah, exactly. So I too have the same, there's a,
Have so many.
yeah.
God.
And the questions we originally thought of and which we discussed among ourselves
We
before
never get
Vidya
to.
came on, we never got to really. Uh, it always, leaves me with the sense of, God, I wish there were some 3 hours more or whatever.
Mm.
And I'm sure if we had those 3 hours, we would still be left with questions.
Yeah, and I think we need to make good on some things that we've been saying about
Yes.
in every without fail every episode, that we're going to have them back,
Yeah.
and either maybe even go to their field site, see what it's like. I don't know, add layers of richness
Yeah.
to these stories to bring it home to our audiences. But the point you made earlier about you being baffled, um, the more I hear every one of our guests, the more I think of what Tarikul Bhai told me when I was researching Margin Lands, that
Mhm.
a Bengali saying that the hardest person to wake is the one who pretends to be asleep.
Yeah.
And literally, I feel that it's not that the people crafting policy or the people who are in charge don't know some of these things. It's probably that they do know it,
Yeah.
So,
There's a related saying that you can't make people understand something when their livelihood depends on their not understanding
hmm.
it.
But yet, there are people, like she mentioned, in rural India
Yeah.
who are okay with losses because they say that it's also the animal's right to the land.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are the people on top who will stand to lose a lot if it's not status quo and business as usual. So there's both sides of that coin playing out over there.
Yeah.
Terrible. Terrible in a way, but I liked how hopeful Vidya was, that we are and we have this amazing opportunity to be this country that has this brilliant assemblage of flora and fauna. And
In close juxtaposition with
1.5 billion people,
billion
right?
people. Yeah.
Which other country in the world can forget the population, but just the fact that there's this press and this compression of people
Yeah.
sharing landscapes, people and animals. It's an opportunity. What will we do with it?
Yeah. What will
Right?
we do with it
We
is the
didn't get
question.
to some of those things that are even in the news these days and so on. We didn't get to a lot of those issues.
Yeah. Issues relating to translocation, issues relating to forcible migration, all of those things. Yes. Hopefully, we will at some point. And I also like the idea of actually visiting these people in their habitats, if you will, and actually documenting what their work is like and creating podcasts out of that as well.
Yeah.
Uh, it doesn't
Bringing it
have to be
alive, right?
static. Yeah. It
Yeah,
doesn't have to be static conversations.
exactly.
I mean, we keep, in workshops, we keep saying show, don't tell. We've been doing a lot of telling. I think it's time to do some showing.
I like that idea. I like that idea.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's.
Yes. So that's a wrap for this episode. thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Hopefully, that is going to be in the end when you will see this episode, which is going to drop in a week from now.
Mhm.
And
A week from today, exactly. And yeah, as always, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, hit the subscribe button. Thank you to the 30K people who actually thought this was worth it. And in our wildest dreams, we never thought 30K. We certainly didn't think 30K in less than a year for a niche podcast. Thanks to everybody who did subscribe. Do us a favor, if you like what you're hearing, send it to one non subscriber. Let's widen the reach and also widen the conversation. Uh, as usual, hit like, hit subscribe, write to us at marginlands@gmail.com. Comments, criticism, all welcome, even suggestions. And as Aarti said, that's a
yeah,
wrap.
and if it's not email, you can even put it in comments. We look out and we'll read everything that you guys send us. So wherever you send it to us, you know where we are on social media, however you reach out to us. And suggestions are welcome. What topics would you like us to address that we haven't already? Who would you like to see on this show? And how can we improve? Anything,
Mhm.
anything, absolutely. We'd love to hear from you. So take care, stay safe, and we'll see you in a bit.
Thank you all. And as Aarti says, stay safe.
Bye.